term where maybe you are familiar with, maybe you have it, or if you don't have it, maybe a friend of yours have it, a parent have it, or a sibling have it, or a neighbor have it, or your coworker might have it, or maybe you haven't heard of it, but that's okay. I'm going to share with you my personal story of ADHD. Let me give you an example. The term itself, ADHD, is quite well known, but how many people actually know what it is? So in my ex-company, the vice president of legal affairs, he's a classic example of ADHD. When you go into his office, there will be paper all over his table. I mean, being a legal person, you have a lot of print, you kill a lot of trees, you print a lot of paper, and you put them all over your table, right? And being ADHD, you're disorganized. So you got paper all over the table. And you got, as a VP, you got a very big table. So what happens when you use up the space on your table? Okay, you go to your whiteboard with all those magnetic buttons. Okay, you use up the whiteboard. What happens next? You put paper all over your floor, so that when people go into your office, they'll be like, you know, and his personal assistant couldn't understand. So how can an ADHD person, how can a person be so disorganized and yet be a vice president? How does he live his life? And I said to him, well, but you know, ADHD, one of the elements is it's being disorganized. You cannot really fault him for it. And she said, so what if he has ADHD? It's no excuse. He's not trying hard enough to be organized. He's not trying hard enough to organize his own life. But you know what? It's not an excuse because it's real. And what is ADHD? So recently, in last year, in 2017, a medical center or a university in the Netherlands actually conducted a research. They did a brain scan of 3,200 individuals, of which half of them has ADHD and half of them do not. Now the ages of these participants ranges from 4 to 63, so it's a pretty broad range of participants. But this is what is interesting. When they did the scan, they actually found out that people with ADHD actually have smaller brain. Doesn't matter how big your head size is, maybe it's all water, but you actually have a smaller brain. And over here, what they found is people with ADHD and people without ADHD, and these are the ages. You can see that people with ADHD, the brain actually develop much slower. And it doesn't matter that when you hit 12 or teens or adult, your brain development is still somewhat a little bit behind compared to people without ADHD. So it's not an excuse, it's literally a disorder. It's a developmental disorder. Okay? So when you see people misbehaving in the public area, or you know, just your own kids, and people say, you know, this mother don't know how to parent the child. You know, it's just co-parenting. That's why the kid is so mischievous or active, or you know, just acting out in public. But it's not. It's actually a brain disorder. Now, ADHD is usually, in this modern day, is usually diagnosed like maybe in primary school. You know, when you have certain symptoms and your teachers tell parents, you know, you should probably look into ADHD testing for your child to confirm whether or not your child has ADHD. And if you do, then there will be learning support provided accordingly. But when I was growing up, in the 80s and 90s, going to school, that wasn't something that, ADHD wasn't a term that teachers were familiar with. My parents didn't know what is ADHD. My teachers were like, what is ADHD? Nobody knew. So I naturally did not have the support. Okay, so a lot of times I forget to turn in my homework, or I'm just like spacing out in class. People just think that, oh, you're not trying hard enough. Just stop giving yourself excuses. You're so lazy. You're so stupid. You know, why aren't you getting the concept? Because I was spacing out. I wasn't listening. I was just spacing out. You know, it's trying hard to focus, but sometimes it's just in the middle of it. You're somewhere else. Okay. So like this guy is saying, I don't have a short attention span. You have a short interesting span. So as a result of that, of these stigma, you're lazy, you're stupid, people with ADHD generally have an associated depressiveness or low self-esteem. Because of all these names you call them. You don't call them, oh, you're special with ADHD. You call them, you're lazy, you're stupid. So this is another thing that I had to overcome. And another thing is about ADHD. We don't like doing things that we're not interested, not because it's like I don't feel like it, but you know, just the way the brain is wired. It's the part of the brain that connects to rewards and emotions. You know, it's just that when you have lower dopamine in your brain that goes to the reward center of your brain, you just don't find it interesting. You're not motivated to go to do something. So that's why we cannot see the reward associated with the task. And that's why we procrastinate. We have a hard time trying to focus. Now these are the typical symptoms of ADHD. So growing up, I had a hard time trying to focus. I was the kid in the class where I was interested in whatever that was going on with my classmates. So I just walk around. But I do not do my own thing. I was just very interested in what other people were doing in their things, but not my thing. So I don't get my tasks done. I tend to fidget and squirm a lot. I was very active in class. It's like I could have been the mascot for Energizer. And impulsivity, impatience. Okay, until now, as a real life, I mean, in my adulthood, I'm still very impatient. Let me share with you a story. I was in line waiting at the popiah stall. There was like 4 people in front of me. So I was waiting. It took me about half an hour. I was like, why did this take so long? Everybody in front of me was ordering a lot of popiah. And actually, I went there, I just wanted 4, you know, just for myself and my husband. But I was like, so pissed off after waiting for half an hour. I said, the auntie asked me, how many popiahs do you want? I said, auntie, give me 50. Because I waited so long. I want people behind me to wait just as long. So it was very impulsive. Like, I want 50. So in the end, when I went home with my 50 popiahs, my husband looked at me like, what were you thinking? 50 popiahs, really? So never mind, we had popiahs. My husband and I had popiahs for the rest of the week. That was the story of being impulsive. And I probably wouldn't have stopped that as well. I mean, I think in the future, I mean, it's just hardwired into my brain. It's just hard to change. It's like, you know, it's not something that you can just like control yourself so easily. So maybe next time when I go back to popiah, I might buy another 50. So who knows, right? But then the thing is, I want to point out is your brain is wired this way. So imagine when you have a robot wired to do a certain task, like say maybe for example vacuuming the floor. So you wouldn't go to the robot and say, hey, why aren't you mopping the floor? No excuse, no excuse. You're supposed to be cleaning. No excuse that you're not mopping the floor. You're not trying hard enough. But the thing is, you wouldn't go to a robot and say, you're not trying hard enough, right? But the thing is, you would go to a human being and say, you're not trying hard enough. It's no excuse. So next thing I want to touch on is ADHD Heretic 3. It is. From my personal experience, my father has ADHD, so does my brother. My second brother was lucky. He got away with it. So he kind of like, because he didn't have ADHD, so he's the smart one, he's the hardworking one, he's the successful one. But, I mean, personally, I don't view ADHD as a curse, even though there's high chance I pass ADHD to my child. I view it as a blessing, because why? Later on, I'm going to share a story about one famous person with ADHD. But these are statistics on ADHD. If you have ADHD, it's a high chance, it's like actually a 30 to 40% chance that your child will have ADHD. So if you want 0 chance, then don't marry somebody with ADHD. But it's not all bad. You know those child prodigy that they can do certain tasks, they can like go to university at the age of 14. But your brain is built in such a way that if you're really, really gifted on one side, you tend to lack on the other side. So being ADHD has its disadvantages, but it also, an ADHD person is also very creative. They can think outside the box. You ask them to give you one idea, they can give you 100. And they're also very emotional. And personally, for me, I feel a connection with nature. Leadership, personally, I don't feel that I am such a good leader with my children. But these are the classic gifts of ADHD that comes with the disorder. Now, earlier on, I did mention that being an ADHD is not exactly a curse. Why? Because these famous people, they all have one thing in common, ADHD. I'm going to tell a story about Michael Phelps. So when people look at Michael Phelps, he's like, wow, this guy's got 23 Olympic gold medals. He must really love water. How did he do it? But actually, you know what? Michael Phelps, when he was little, as young as in kindergarten, his teacher actually told his mother, who is also a teacher, that your son will never focus on anything, will never be able to. And that was kindergarten. And at 7 years old, his parents got divorced. So as a diversion to that divorce, his mom started him swimming. And you would think that, okay, maybe as a swim legend, maybe he really is like a dolphin or a merman. He lives in water, but actually no. He hated the water. He threw a fit. He was screaming and kicking. He was throwing his goggles on the floor. He hated it. But then the swim practice continued until he learned how to swim. And that is when he realized that when he learned how to swim, he felt free. When he was in the water, he felt that he could go fast and kind of like slow his mind down. He felt that he has control. And it wasn't just him that appreciated his new passion. His mother felt that swimming was good for him because it drained his energy out of his body before he goes to school, which is if anybody has people who has ADHD or kids with ADHD, you know what I'm talking about. You need to drain their energy before they go to school to help them better cope with school. Now, so he did that, and by the time when he was 9, that was when he was formally diagnosed with ADHD. And one thing about Michael Phelps, he is very fond of making mischief. When he was in his science class, he would turn on all the gas burners in the lab just so that everyone could smell the gas. Or he would do things like he will sign up for a juggling competition when he doesn't even know how to juggle. So he was a mischief maker. But you know what? By the age of 10, he was already a nationally ranked swimmer. And at the age of 15, he took part in the first Olympics in the year 2000 in Sydney. He didn't win any medals back then, but he continued to take part in the subsequent 4 Olympics from 2004 to 2016, and he won a total of 23 gold medals. So his success story is, he didn't let ADHD stop him. He didn't let ADHD distract him from his goals. So instead of feeling depressed and being worn down by ADHD, he propelled himself to success. And right now he actually has a Michael Phelps Foundation where he strives to help people to promote healthy living, healthy lifestyle, and swimming for those who have ADHD to help them better cope with their symptoms as an outlet. So my takeaway from him and from my own personal story is that people with ADHD can succeed. Now, back in the day when I was in school, my principal, just before my O-levels, my principal wrote in my report card, Gladys will never, ever succeed. I was actually quite shocked and crushed, and I felt resentful of that statement. So how can you determine, just because looking at my grades, I will never ever succeed? My brother, who actually has a university degree back then, he had the same perception of me. You will never ever succeed. You're so lazy, you're just stupid, you'll never ever succeed. So just because of that sentence, I turned myself around. I actually began studying. I forced myself to study. And because of that, I went to university. I did my first master's in law, and this is my second master's in information studies. Thank you folks so much for your